You're in the market for a handheld gaming PC. You could go with the aging Steam Deck, or you could go with something new like the ROG Ally Xbox X, or the ROG Xbox Ally, ROG Ally Xbox. Too confusing for me. But where do you go? Do you go with the Steam Deck, or do you go with a Windows handheld? Hmm, choices. You might think, well, I should get the latest product, it's going to last me longer. Have you seen that meme on the internet? Just get a Steam Deck? Now, I didn't believe in that. I got the Steam Deck thinking, yeah, I'll get it, it'll be fine. But after owning one, I can see why that meme is so popular. It is the perfect handheld for those dipping their toes into the water of handheld gaming PCs. Getting a handheld gaming PC, it's quite a hard thing to do because there are so many options out there available to us right now, and they're not cheap. You want to make sure that the device is going to fit your needs and play the games that you want to play. And, it's hard when some devices aren't available in physical retailers. You want to go to these shops and you want to pick them up and see how they feel in hand. When I was looking around at the handhelds, there was, they're all similar devices, no real grips like the Xbox ROG Ally. It was all, like the Steam Deck. And I thought, which one of these is going to be more comfortable? I can't go and hold a Steam Deck as, Steam Decks are just sold through Valve. You look at the layout and think, which one's going to suit me best? And as weird as the Steam Deck's layout is, for me, I think it just works brilliantly. It's very comfortable. It's got the nice grips at the back, and it's got the four buttons at the back. Fits great in hand. The button layout actually does work. The touchpads are in nice places. And these touchpads are decent for moving around. Especially when you're navigating in desktop mode. This is, desktop mode's brilliant. The navigation on SteamOS is brilliant. You know, I've seen a lot about these Windows PCs, and I was really put off about, how hard it is when you see all these videos, where you're having to update four pieces of software just to make sure that your device can run smoothly. Why do you want to give yourself that headache? You know, you want to be able to play something simply. You just want to simply play something. And this is where SteamOS is brilliant. It is like a gaming console, the fact that it's streamlined and it's got something going on in the background, but it's mostly there targeted towards people who just want to game. Why else should you get a Steam Deck over the competition? Well, the community is huge. I've seen figures that Valve have sold around 4 million Steam Decks, and that is pretty big in quite a niche market, compared to the likes of the Switch, which has sold, tens of millions. The Steam Deck's actually sold quite well, and a lot more than the competition. So, if something goes wrong with it, you know that there's a community out there who will help you. Another reason I chose to go with the Steam Deck is the fact that, Valve are renowned for having great customer service. I can remember getting a Football Manager game a fair few years ago, and I tried running it on like a 2009 MacBook Pro. And I tried it, it didn't work. And I got a refund very quickly from Valve. And I feel like if that was Xbox, PlayStation, I wouldn't get that. And that stayed with me. And, to be honest, I didn't realize he still did it. So I was pretty pleased to see that. So that's a great bonus. Yeah, I know you can get Steam OS on, the Windows handhelds, but to have that overall customer service for, game refunds with Steam OS, it's going to transfer across as well to the actual Steam Deck, where I've seen people get decks sent in and for them to be sorted pretty quickly. I think Valve's customer service really makes them stand out above the crowd, and I think that's it's a big reason to actually have the Steam Deck. Although an aging device, I think it's one to seriously consider. Valve's customer service is brilliant, and I think yes, you may not be getting the latest and best performing handheld out there, but I think it's that peace of mind knowing that if something does go wrong, you've got a company who, will look to help you out. Especially when you're dropping £500, £700, maybe £1,000 on the device. You want to be comfortable knowing that if something goes wrong, it's going to get fixed, and you're not going to get thrown from here to kingdom come. You know, you just want to go somewhere, get it sorted, and be back playing with it. I read a thing about ASUS and the issues that they had with the white outline and the SD card, and that put me off. Looking at them, where the Steam Deck and Valve, it just was renowned for having great customer service. Another reason to look at owning the Steam Deck is the massive library they've got. I know you can get Steam on the Windows handhelds, but you know, these games do run better on Steam Deck. There's tests out there where they've run Cyberpunk, Red Dead on Steam OS and Windows handheld, and the Steam Deck can outperform them. When the settings are the same, SteamOS wins because there's less going on in the background. And I think that is something you might want to consider, that, the Steam Deck is optimized to run games better than Windows. And if you don't want headaches when you're playing your games, then surely the Steam Deck is the one for you. Now, this is an issue with the Steam Deck, is the fact that there are way too many games out there. I was browsing CD keys, or loaded, whatever it's called these days, and I couldn't believe the amount of games that are available for under like £4. In my basket right now, I've got Batman Arkham Trilogy for like £3.20, 14, old Star Wars games, including Knights of the Old Republic and, Jedi Outcast, BioShock Collection. And it's something like £18 for about 20 odd games. Now, that is an amazing deal to have. And, I know that these games can run pretty well on deck after checking various websites like Proton Database and the app Deck Settings. So to wrap up, I think if you are considering, getting a Steam Deck, I honestly think that it is the best one out there for like 99% of the users, especially if you've got a console or PC already. The fact that it just works, it's got a great support network. Games are dirt cheap, especially when you have the Steam sales. It's hard to argue about why not to get one. If you are very much into your single player games, then it is one to get. And, if you do want to play the latest AAA games, you have got the option of, if you do want to play your AAA games and maybe you haven't got a console or PC, or console or a PC, then you have got the option of, GeForce Now, the cloud streaming service from Nvidia. And, yeah, you'll have to pay for it, but it's, it's something that's available to you should you wish to use it. Okay, so thanks for watching this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you're thinking about dipping into the world of handheld gaming PCs. What experience have you had previously with handhelds? Were you into your Game Gears, your Game Boys? Was the Switch your first handheld game device? And, it's really made you think about, getting a beefier system which can play more games. Let me know in the comments down below. Are you going to get a deck? Are you going to go with something different? I'd love to hear from you. Once again, thanks for the support on the videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, we'll evolve.